The moment Delilah Owens stepped off the stagecoach in Marfa, Texas, she knew every eye in town was fixed on her, and not in admiration. At 6 feet and 2 inches tall, she towered over most men in the dusty frontier town, her height a curse she had carried since she sprouted up like a weed at 14 years old. The year was 1878, and proper ladies were supposed to be delicate flowers, not towering oaks that made their suitors feel inadequate. "Good Lord, that woman's a giant," she heard someone mutter from the covered walkway. Delilah kept her chin high, though her heart sank lower with each whispered comment. She had traveled from Virginia after her aunt's passing, inheriting a small boarding house on the edge of this West Texas town. At 23, she had resigned herself to spinsterhood after a parade of rejected proposals and humiliating encounters with men who couldn't bear the thought of looking up at their wife. The sun beat down mercilessly as she gathered her 2 worn carpetbags and began the walk toward the address the lawyer had provided. Marfa was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures clustered together against the vast expanse of desert and distant mountains. The Davis Mountains loomed in the distance, purple and mysterious against the bright blue sky. "Miss, you need help with those bags." A short man with a thick mustache approached, then seemed to reconsider when he had to crane his neck back to meet her eyes. "Never mind, looks like you got it handled." Delilah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. This was nothing new. She had heard it all before. Too tall, too imposing, too unfeminine. Her mother had tried everything to make her seem smaller, shorter dresses, flat shoes, encouraging her to slouch. Nothing worked, and nothing changed the fact that God had made her this way. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. It needed work, but it was hers, the first thing that had ever truly belonged to her. As she pushed open the front door, dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through grimy windows. The interior smelled of disuse and time, but the bones of the place were solid. She spent the rest of the day cleaning, sweeping, and taking inventory of what needed repair. The roof had a leak in the back bedroom. Several floorboards needed replacing. The stove worked, thank heavens, but the pump in the kitchen squeaked something awful. She would need help, proper help from someone who knew construction and repair. As evening fell, Delilah made her way to the general store before it closed. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles, barely concealed his shock at her height. "I need supplies," she said, keeping her voice steady. "And I need to know who in town does repair work." The man cleared his throat. "Well, there's old Pete, but his hands shake too much these days. And there's the Miller boys, but they're usually busy with their ranch." He paused, seeming to consider. "Your best bet would be Quentin Jennings, but he don't come into town much. Lives up in the mountains, traps and hunts mostly. Comes down every few weeks for supplies and to sell his furs." "When will he be in town next?" "Hard to say with Quentin. He keeps his own schedule. Could be tomorrow, could be next week." Delilah purchased flour, coffee, beans, and a few other essentials, then made her way back to the boarding house as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. She lay awake that night on the one clean bed she had managed to prepare, listening to the sounds of the desert night and wondering what she had gotten herself into. 3 days passed with backbreaking work. She cleaned every room, washed every window, and did her best to patch the roof leak with materials she found in the shed out back. The townspeople kept their distance, polite but cool. The women seemed wary of her, as if her height might be contagious. The men looked everywhere but at her face. On the 4th morning, she was attempting to fix a loose board on the front porch when she heard the unmistakable sound of a horse approaching. She looked up, hammer in hand, and felt her breath catch. The man riding toward her boarding house was unlike anyone she had ever seen. He sat astride a massive bay horse that seemed barely adequate for his size. He was enormous, broad-shouldered and thick with muscle, wearing buckskin clothing that had seen hard use. His hair fell past his shoulders, dark brown with sun-lightened streaks, and a full beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that struck her most, pale blue and startling against his tanned skin. He dismounted with fluid grace despite his size, and Delilah realized with a shock that she was looking up at him. Actually looking up. He had to be at least 6 feet and 6 inches, maybe more. "Heard there was a new owner here," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Name's Quentin Jennings. Folks in town said you might need some repair work done." Delilah stood, very aware that she still had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Yes, I do. The roof leaks, and there are several boards that need replacing, and the pump squeaks," and she stopped herself from rattling off the entire list. Quentin's gaze traveled over her, but not in the way she was used to. There was no judgment in his eyes, no discomfort. He looked at her the way a man might look at a woman, with interest and something else she couldn't quite name. "You are tall," he said simply. Delilah stiffened, preparing for the inevitable comment about how no man would want such an oversized woman. She had heard variations of it her entire adult life, but Quentin's next words stopped her cold. "I like that. Most women I meet barely come up to my chest, always afraid I am going to break them." He stepped closer, and Delilah found herself rooted to the spot. He looked down at her, really looked at her, and slowly a smile spread across his face. "You are perfect." The words hung in the air between them. Delilah felt something crack inside her chest, some hard shell she had built up over years of rejection and ridicule. No one had ever called her perfect. No one had ever looked at her height as anything but a flaw. She started, then had to clear her throat. "Thank you. Let me look at what needs fixing," Quentin said, his tone practical now. "I can start today if you like. I have time before I need to head back up the mountain." They spent the next hour walking through the boarding house, while Delilah pointed out everything that needed attention. Quentin listened carefully, occasionally running his large, calloused hands over a beam or testing a floorboard with his weight. He moved through the spaces carefully, as if conscious of his size, but there was nothing awkward about him. He seemed comfortable in his own skin in a way Delilah had never quite managed. "This will take about a week of solid work," he finally said. "I can do it for $75, materials included." It was more than fair, cheaper than she had expected. "That's acceptable. When can you start?" "Now, if you want." Quentin went to work immediately, and Delilah found herself watching him more than she probably should. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew his own strength, handling heavy beams as if they weighed nothing. His muscles flexed beneath his shirt as he worked, and there was something mesmerizing about the way he approached each task with focused intensity. She forced herself to return to her own work, preparing the rooms for eventual boarders. But she found her gaze drifting to the windows, watching him repair the porch, then move to the roof. At midday, she brought him water and some bread and cheese she had prepared. He had removed his shirt in the heat, and Delilah tried not to stare at the expanse of bronzed, muscled flesh. He was built like the mountains he called home, solid and unmovable. "You should eat in the shade," she said, gesturing to the porch where she had set up a small table and chairs. Quentin nodded and followed her, lowering himself into a chair that creaked under his weight. He ate with the single-minded focus he brought to everything, then leaned back and studied her. "Why did you come to Marfa?" he asked. "My aunt left me the boarding house. I had nothing keeping me in Virginia, so I came west." She hesitated, then added, I thought maybe in a new place people would be different. Different how? Less bothered by my height. Quentin's expression darkened. People gave you trouble about that all my life. I have been told I am too tall for any man, that I am unfeminine and ungainly, that I make men uncomfortable. The words spilled out before she could stop them, years of hurt and rejection bubbling to the surface. He was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes never leaving her face. Any man who is bothered by a woman's height is not much of a man. A real man does not need to be bigger or stronger or taller to feel like a man. He just needs to be true to himself and protective of what matters. Not everyone sees it that way. Then everyone else is a fool. He stood, and once again Delilah was struck by the sheer size of him. I will get back to work. I want to finish the roof before the day gets too hot. Over the next several days, Quentin became a constant presence at the boarding house. He arrived at dawn and worked until dusk, methodically fixing everything on Delilah's list, and several things she had not even noticed needed repair. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. Delilah found herself looking forward to their shared meals, the brief conversations that revealed pieces of who he was. He had come west 5 years ago after his family died in a fever outbreak back in Missouri. The mountains had called to him, and he had made them his home, preferring the company of trees and sky to the complications of town living. "You get lonely up there?" she asked one evening as they sat on the newly repaired porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I have learned that being alone is better than being with people who make you feel wrong for being who you are." She understood that sentiment more than he knew. "Do you ever think about settling down, finding a wife?" Quentin was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "I thought about it, but most women want things I cannot give them. Fancy houses, social standing, a husband who comes home every night smelling of soap instead of pine trees and wood smoke." He glanced at her. "What about you? You ever think about marrying?" "I did once, but after enough rejections I stopped thinking about it. No man wants a wife he has to look up at." "I told you you are perfect." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Any man with eyes can see that." Delilah felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the evening warmth. "You hardly know me." "I know you are strong. I watched you try to fix that roof yourself before I got here. I know you are brave, coming all the way out here alone to start over. I know you are kind, because you bring me water even when it means climbing down from whatever you are working on. And I know you are beautiful, though I suspect no one has told you that in a long while." She stared at him, her heart hammering in her chest. "Quentin, I am just stating facts," he said, but there was something in his eyes that was more than factual observation. It was heat and interest and possibility. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an awareness that had been building over days of proximity. Delilah found herself leaning toward him, drawn by something she could not name but desperately wanted to understand. A coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell. Quentin cleared his throat and stood. "I should head back. I will be here tomorrow to finish the last of the repairs." Delilah watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, her mind spinning. She had never met anyone like Quentin Jennings. He made her feel things she had thought herself incapable of feeling, things she had locked away after too many disappointments. That night, she dreamed of mountain air and strong hands and blue eyes that saw her as perfect. The next day was brutally hot, the kind of West Texas heat that made everything shimmer and waver. Quentin worked through it with grim determination, finishing the pump repair and replacing the last of the damaged floorboards. By mid-afternoon, he was done. "That is everything," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. The boarding house is ready for guests." Delilah handed him the money they had agreed upon, but her hands shook slightly as she did. She did not want him to leave. The thought of him riding back up into the mountains, of not seeing him for weeks or maybe ever again, felt wrong in a way she could not articulate. "Thank you," she managed. "You did excellent work." Quentin pocketed the money but made no move toward his horse. Instead, he stood there, looking at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his thinking face, all intensity and focus. "Delilah," he finally said, her name sounding different in his deep voice, rougher and somehow more intimate. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, all right? Do you feel it too, this thing between us?" Her breath caught. She could lie, protect herself from potential hurt, or she could be brave the way he said she was. "Yes," she whispered. "I feel it." He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and then his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up toward him. "I have been alone a long time by choice. But these past days with you I have not felt alone. I have felt like I found something I did not know I was looking for." "Quentin," she breathed, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I know I am not much. I live in a cabin in the mountains. I smell like pine trees and leather. I do not have fancy manners or much education, but I can provide for you. I can keep you safe. And I can promise you that I will never, not for 1 second, make you feel like your height is anything but a gift." Tears stung her eyes. "I do not need fancy things. I never have. I just wanted someone to look at me the way you do, like I am not too much or too tall or too anything. Just right." "You are," he said fiercely. "You are exactly right." Then he kissed her, and Delilah felt her entire world shift. His lips were gentle despite his size, questioning rather than demanding. She kissed him back, pouring all her loneliness and hope and sudden, fierce joy into that connection. His arms came around her, and for the first time in her life, she felt protected rather than oversized, cherished rather than tolerated. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "Come with me," he said. "Come up to the mountains, see where I live. If you like it, if you think you could be happy there, then stay. If not, I will bring you back and we will figure something else out. But give us a chance." It was insane. She barely knew him. She had just opened the boarding house. There were 100 practical reasons to say no. "Yes," she said instead, because sometimes the heart knows things the head cannot understand. "Yes, I will come with you." They left the next morning, Delilah on a gentle mare Quentin had arranged to borrow from a rancher outside town, and him on his massive bay. They rode northwest toward the Davis Mountains, the landscape growing more rugged and beautiful with each mile. Quentin was patient with her inexperience on horseback, stopping often to let her rest and stretch. He pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the land, his voice a constant, comforting presence. "The mountains are not easy," he warned as they climbed higher into the foothills. "Winters can be harsh. Summers are hot. You have to work hard just to survive. But there is a peace up there I have never found anywhere else, a rightness." "I am not afraid of hard work," Delilah said, "and I think I understand about rightness. I feel it when I am with you." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his bearded face into something almost boyish. "Good. That is real good." They reached his cabin late in the afternoon of the second day. It was larger than she had expected, a solid structure of logs and stone nestled in a clearing surrounded by ponderosa pines. A stream burbled nearby, and the air smelled clean and sharp, nothing like the dusty heat of Marfa. "I built it myself," Quentin said, dismounting and helping her down. His hands lingered on her waist, and she found herself reluctant to step away. "It has 2 rooms, a main living area with the kitchen and a bedroom. The roof is good and the fireplace draws well. Delilah walked through the cabin in a daze. It was sparse but clean, furnished with handmade furniture that showed skill and care. Furs covered the floor and the bed, and the windows looked out on views that stole her breath. This was not what she had imagined her life would be, but standing here in this mountain sanctuary, she felt something settle inside her. "It is wonderful," she said honestly. "It is like something from a dream." Quentin stood in the doorway, watching her with those intense blue eyes. "You can sleep in the bedroom. I will take the main room. I want you to be comfortable, Delilah. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance for us to get to know each other proper." They fell into an easy routine over the next several days. Quentin taught her about the mountains, showing her how to identify animal tracks and edible plants, where the best fishing spots were in the stream, and how to move quietly through the forest. She proved an apt student, her height and strength serving her well in the rugged terrain. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked for hours. She told him about her childhood in Virginia, about her mother's despair over having a daughter who towered over every potential suitor, about the small cruelties and large rejections that had shaped her life. He told her about his family, the pain of losing them all at once, the years of drifting before he found these mountains and decided to stay. "I was angry for a long time," he admitted one night, firelight dancing across his features. "Angry at God, at fate, at the world. But the mountains taught me that anger is just pain with nowhere to go. I learned to let it flow through me and out, like water over stones." "I was not angry," Delilah said softly. "I was just sad, sad that I could not be what people wanted me to be. Sad that something I could not change made me unlovable." Quentin reached across the space between them and took her hand, his large, rough palm enveloping hers. "You are not unlovable. You are the most lovable woman I have ever met, and I am falling for you so hard and fast it scares me." Her heart stuttered. "Quentin, I know it is soon, I know we should take this slow, but I am not a man who plays games or hides what he feels. I want you, Delilah. I want you to stay here with me. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to build a life together, you and me, in these mountains." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "But only if that is what you want too." Delilah looked at him, this mountain of a man who had seen her height as perfect rather than a flaw, who had offered her a place in his life with no conditions or demands. She thought about the boarding house in Marfa, sitting empty. She thought about the life she had imagined for herself, safe and solitary and small. Then she thought about the way she felt when Quentin looked at her, like she was exactly who she was meant to be. She thought about the peace she had found in these mountains, the rightness Quentin had spoken of. She thought about the possibility of love, real love, with a man who made her feel treasured rather than tolerated. "I want it too," she said, her voice steady despite the wild beating of her heart. "I want to stay. I want to build a life with you." The smile that spread across Quentin's face was worth every moment of uncertainty, every fear she had pushed through to get here. He stood, pulling her up with him, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her like she was air and he had been drowning. "I will take care of you," he murmured against her lips. "I swear it. You will never regret choosing me, choosing this life." "I know," she said, and she did know, deep in her bones where truth lived. "I am not worried." That night she did not retreat to the bedroom. Instead, they lay together on furs in front of the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, talking and kissing and planning their future. Quentin was respectful of her innocence, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but the heat between them was undeniable. His hands traced the long lines of her body with reverence, and she explored the hard planes of his chest and back with growing boldness. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, his lips tracing the column of her throat. "So perfect. I cannot believe you are here with me." "I cannot believe I almost said no," she admitted, gasping as his teeth grazed her pulse point. "I almost let fear keep me in Marfa. But you did not. You were brave, my brave, beautiful Delilah." They did not make love that night, both agreeing without words that they should wait until they were properly married. But they learned each other in other ways, discovering what made the other sigh with pleasure, what drew soft moans and breathless laughter. By the time sleep finally claimed them, tangled together in the firelight, Delilah felt more cherished than she had in her entire life. The next morning, Quentin rode down to Marfa to make arrangements. He returned 2 days later with a preacher, a round man named Reverend Hollis, who had agreed to perform a marriage ceremony in the mountains. "I also sent word to a few folks I know," Quentin said, looking almost sheepish. "Thought you might want some witnesses. There is a family, the Coopers, who have a ranch about 10 miles from here. Good people. They should arrive tomorrow." Delilah threw her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. I would have married you with just the trees as witnesses, but this is better. This is perfect." The Coopers arrived the next afternoon, a cheerful couple in their 40s with 3 grown children and a daughter-in-law. Mrs. Cooper, a tiny woman with laugh lines around her eyes, took one look at Delilah and beamed. "Oh, you two are going to have the tallest, most beautiful babies," she declared, making Delilah blush and Quentin laugh. "I am so happy for you both. Quentin has been alone up here too long. It is time he had someone to share this life with." They were married the following morning in the clearing in front of the cabin, with the mountains as their cathedral and the pine trees as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple blue dress Mrs. Cooper had helped her press, and Quentin had trimmed his beard and pulled his hair back. But it was not their appearance that mattered. It was the way they looked at each other, the promises they made with hands clasped and hearts open. "I, Quentin Jennings, take you, Delilah Owens, to be my wife," he said, his deep voice carrying in the mountain air. "I promise to protect you, provide for you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to see you as you are, perfect and strong and brave. I promise to build a life with you that honors both of us." Delilah's voice shook with emotion as she repeated her own vows. "I, Delilah Owens, take you, Quentin Jennings, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you to share your burdens and your joys. I promise to build a home with you in these mountains, to honor the life we are creating together. I promise to love you with everything I am." When Reverend Hollis pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin pulled her close and kissed her deeply, seemingly unconcerned about their small audience. Mrs. Cooper clapped her hands in delight, and even the stoic Mr. Cooper cracked a smile. They celebrated with a simple meal Mrs. Cooper had prepared, venison stew and fresh bread, eaten outside under the vast blue sky. The Coopers regaled them with stories of their own early years of marriage, the challenges and triumphs, and Delilah felt welcomed into a community she had not known existed up here. As evening fell and their guests departed, Quentin and Delilah finally found themselves alone as husband and wife. The cabin felt different somehow, charged with new possibility. Quentin built up the fire while Delilah changed into the simple white nightgown Mrs. Cooper had given her as a wedding gift. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Quentin waiting, his eyes darkening as he took in the sight of her. "Come here," he said softly, extending his hand. She went to him without hesitation, and he gathered her close. "Are you nervous?" He asked against her hair. "A little," she admitted. "But mostly I am just happy. I never thought I would have this. A husband who loves me, a home, a future." You have all that and more, he promised. You have me completely and forever. He led her to the bedroom, and there in the firelight filtering through the door, they came together as husband and wife. Quentin was gentle and patient, taking his time despite his obvious desire, making sure she felt only pleasure. And when they finally joined, moving together in the ancient rhythm, Delilah understood what it meant to be truly seen, truly loved, truly perfect in another's eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Delilah's head on Quentin's broad chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat. "I love you," she whispered. "I should have said it before, but I love you, Quentin." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too. From the moment I saw you standing on that porch with a hammer in your hand, too stubborn to wait for help, you are everything I never knew I needed." They drifted to sleep like that, wrapped in each other and the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, something worth every risk and leap of faith. The next months passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Delilah adapted to mountain life with surprising ease, her strength and height serving her well. She learned to hunt alongside Quentin, to tan hides and preserve meat, to read the weather in the clouds and the behavior of animals. He taught her everything he knew, patient and encouraging, and she proved an eager student. But it was not all work. They made time for joy, for long walks through the forest, for lazy mornings in bed, for evenings spent talking by the fire. Quentin carved her a rocking chair that fit her height perfectly, and she sewed him new shirts from fabric they obtained on their infrequent trips to Marfa. They went to town together once a month for supplies, and while some people still stared, Delilah found she did not care anymore. Let them stare. She had everything she needed in the man beside her, the life they were building together. The boarding house they decided to sell to a young widow who needed a fresh start. The money went toward improvements to the cabin, including an addition that would serve as a workshop for Quentin's leatherwork and a place for Delilah to work on her own projects. She had discovered a talent for making herbal remedies from the plants Quentin taught her to identify, and several families in the area had started coming to her for help with minor ailments. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Delilah realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another 2 weeks to be certain, then told Quentin one evening as they prepared dinner together. "I think I am with child," she said, stirring the pot of stew with studied casualness. Quentin froze, the knife he had been using to slice bread clattering to the table. "You think or you know? I am fairly certain. All the signs are there." He crossed to her in 2 strides, his large hands cupping her face, his eyes searching hers. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," she admitted. "But happy. So happy, Quentin. I never thought I would have this, a family of my own." His grin split his bearded face, and then he was laughing, a joyous sound that filled the cabin. He spun her around, careful despite his enthusiasm, then set her down and dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is your papa. I cannot wait to meet you. I promise I will love you and protect you always. You and your mama both." Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, looking up at her with such love it made her chest ache. "The luckiest baby in the world with the most amazing mama." The pregnancy was not easy. Morning sickness plagued her through the first months, and as she grew larger, the mountain terrain became more challenging to navigate. But Quentin was endlessly patient, adjusting his routine to accommodate her needs, taking over tasks that had become difficult for her. Mrs. Cooper visited regularly as Delilah's time grew near, bringing supplies and offering advice. "Your first baby always takes the longest," she said cheerfully. "But you are strong, and Quentin will not leave your side. You will be fine." When the labor pains began on a cold February morning in 1879, Quentin sent word to Mrs. Cooper, and then held Delilah's hand through the long hours that followed. He bathed her face with cool water, encouraged her when she wanted to give up, and never once flinched at her pain even though she could see it hurt him to watch her suffer. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, their son was born, squalling and healthy and perfect. Quentin cut the cord with shaking hands, then helped Mrs. Cooper clean the baby before placing him in Delilah's arms. "A boy," Delilah breathed, studying the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the impossibly small fingers that gripped her thumb with surprising strength. "We have a son." "We have a son," Quentin echoed, his voice breaking. He sat beside her on the bed, his massive frame seeming almost fragile in that moment. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Delilah. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas after Quentin's father, and he was indeed perfect. Long and lean even as an infant, he would clearly take after his parents in height. He had Quentin's blue eyes and Delilah's determined chin, and from the moment he entered the world, he owned their hearts completely. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a curious, adventurous boy who loved the mountains as much as his father. 2 years after his birth, they welcomed a daughter, Margaret, who had her mother's height and her father's quiet intensity. And 3 years after that, another son, James, who was sunny and social and kept them all laughing. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, and so did their circle of friends and community. Delilah's remedies became well known throughout the region, and Quentin's skills as a tracker and hunter were sought after. They were not wealthy, but they had enough, and what they had felt like abundance. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Delilah and Quentin would sit on the porch they had expanded over the years, watching the stars emerge over the dark bulk of the mountains. "You ever regret it?" Quentin asked one such evening, his arm around her shoulders. "Leaving the boarding house, coming up here with a man you barely knew?" "Never," Delilah said firmly. "Not once. This life, our family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. You saw me, Quentin, really saw me. You looked at the thing everyone else told me was wrong, and you said it was perfect." "Because it is," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You are perfect. You always were. I was just smart enough to recognize it." She laughed, leaning into his solid warmth. "We are both lucky, I think, lucky we found each other." "Lucky and smart," he agreed, "though mostly lucky." As the years passed and their children grew, that feeling of rightness never faded. Thomas eventually married a girl from Marfa and settled on a piece of land near the cabin, building his own life while staying close to his roots. Margaret, true to her independent nature, became a teacher in Fort Davis, the county seat, but came home every holiday. James, the youngest, apprenticed with his father, learning the ways of the mountains and planning to take over the trapping business eventually. Delilah and Quentin grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. Silver threaded through Quentin's long hair and beard, and lines etched themselves around Delilah's eyes and mouth, but neither felt old. They felt lived in, weathered like the mountains themselves, strong and enduring. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quentin took Delilah back to the clearing where they had married. The ponderosa pines had grown taller, and the cabin had expanded significantly, but the essence of the place remained the same. "I want to renew our vows," he said, taking her hands in his. "Here where we started, just you and me and the mountains." So they stood together in the afternoon light and repeated the promises they had made 2 decades before. The words were the same, but they carried more weight now. seasoned by years of keeping them, by the life they had built on the foundation of those vows. "I still think you are perfect," Quentin said when they finished, pulling her close. "Even more than the day I first saw you. Every year with you has been a gift." "I love you," Delilah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for this life. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes to a mountain man you barely knew. Thank you for trusting me with your heart." They held each other as the sun set over the peaks. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. Two people who had built something lasting and true out of hope and faith and love. More years passed, bringing grandchildren who filled the cabin with noise and laughter, bringing challenges and triumphs, bringing the inevitable sorrows that come with a long life. But through it all, Delilah and Quentin remained each other's anchor, each other's joy. When they were both in their 70s, their children grown and their grandchildren starting families of their own, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. "You know what I think about sometimes," Delilah said, her hand in Quentin's. "I think about that girl who stepped off the stagecoach in Marfa, so sure she would spend her life alone because she was too tall for any man. I wish I could tell her what was coming, that she would find not just any man but the perfect man for her." Quentin squeezed her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I think about the man I was before I met you, alone in these mountains, convincing himself that solitude was better than taking a chance on love. You changed everything, Delilah. You made my life fuller and richer than I ever imagined it could be. We saved each other, I think," she said softly. "We did. And we built something beautiful together. Look at all this." He gestured at the expanded cabin, at the workshop and the garden, at the land where their children and grandchildren lived. "Look at the family we made, the life we created. Not bad for a too-tall woman and a mountain man." She laughed, the sound still bright despite the years. "Not bad at all." As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two souls who had found their perfect match against all odds. The mountains stood eternal around them, witness to their love story, guardian of the life they had built together. It was not a fairy tale, though it had its magical moments. It was real and sometimes hard and always worthwhile. It was the story of two people who had been told they would never fit anywhere, who found in each other the perfect fit. It was a love story, pure and simple and true, set against the wild beauty of the West Texas mountains. And it was perfect, just as Quentin had said Delilah was on that first day. Perfect in its imperfections, perfect in its realness, perfect in the way it honored both of them and the life they chose to build together. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not what others thought or said, not the expectations they failed to meet or the conventions they ignored. What mattered was the love they shared, the family they created, the home they built in the shadow of the mountains. They had taken a chance on each other when the world said they should not, and they had won. They had loved and been loved in return, deeply and truly and lasting. And that made everything, every challenge and hardship, every moment of doubt worth it. As they climbed into bed that night, Quentin pulled Delilah close, her head resting on his chest as it had done for 40 years. "Still perfect," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. "Still perfect," she agreed, closing her eyes and smiling. And they drifted off to sleep together. Two people who had found their forever in each other. Two people who had proven that the right love at the right time with the right person could overcome anything. Their story was not about height or mountains or the Wild West, though those elements played their parts. It was about seeing and being seen, about acceptance and courage, about two people brave enough to reach for happiness, even when the world told them it was not meant for them. It was a love story, and it was perfect.